Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen Irwin, and welcome back to my channel, Healing for Your Life. Today we're going to begin a series of videos that will cover, anywhere from 10 to 15 videos in order on the developmental roadmap. There will be additional ones later on, but we're going to start with a group of them, the introduction to that being today. So a number of years ago, back in the early 2000s, after years of interest in developmental processes in children, infants, children, and adults, and being a mother myself and knowing how I wanted to raise my children, and then in my analytic work, becoming an expert in developmental work therapeutically, I created a new paradigm, a new model of development. And this model includes 7 keystones that make up healthy development. Now, each one is a unit in and of itself. And they do come online, so to speak, in the brain and in the nervous system developmentally in an infant and young child in a certain order. But they also interrelate, and there's a very dynamic interrelationship among all of these 7 keystones. So if you want to give yourself a good metaphor to think about, if you think about a juggler who has those long flexible poles and he has a plate spinning on top of each one and he gets them all going one by one, he wants to keep making sure that they continue to spin without any of them getting wobbly or falling off and crashing. And so he works very hard at keeping all of those plates going. Well, development is something the same way. We have these 7 keystones, and even though each one has its own particular nature and characteristics and qualities and tasks, we want all of them to come online and then interrelate in a way that builds up a healthy personality in an individual. Now later on, in another series of videos, we're going to look at what happens to that healthy development when there are failures in the environment or there is trauma that occurs, and the impact that that traumatic experience or that failure experience has on each one of these keystones. And then finally, much later down the road, there's going to be another series of what do we do about it in current time? How can we as individuals work on ourselves to recover in each one of those areas, depending on where our greatest or lesser needs are? Also, what can we do in terms of raising our children, and what we can do therapeutically. So this playlist is for anyone, an individual, a parent, or a therapist who is interested, or a teacher who is interested in what development means, what healthy development looks like, what happens to it when there are failures or trauma, and what we can do to resolve that and transform development later in our lives. So to begin, today we're just going to look at these 7 elements. Now, it's going to be a cursory look to begin, because in the next 7 videos, I'm going to be focusing on each one of these keystones by itself. And then in the last video of that series, we'll show how they all work together. So today, we're just going to name those 7 keystones and say a little bit about them just so that you can understand what we're talking about. The first that comes on board in development is state systems. Now, a state is a particular way of being. There are 8 elements in a state that I've determined, and we're going to explore those in the next video. But a state is not just a mood, it isn't just a feeling, it isn't just a sensation. It's a combination of all of those things. So you'll know what I mean if I tell you, think about when you're at work, you're in a particular state depending on all kinds of circumstances. If you're home folding laundry or cooking a meal, you're in a very different state. If you're lovemaking, you're in yet another very different state. And they all include feeling, emotion, sensation, belief systems, and these other elements that I will be discussing next. Well, our state system begins in utero. So if our mothers are having a peaceful pregnancy, everything is going to unfold very naturally. Our brain is going to be wiring itself, especially in the last trimester. And we will be born with 5 basic states. They are pre-crying, full-fledged crying, awake, fussiness, and deep sleep. By the time we're 18 months old, we have thousands of states, and it is called state architecture, or our personality. Now, we're going to learn much more about this in the next video that is devoted just to states. But that is the first element, the first keystone that really comes on board in our development. The second are our memory systems. We basically have 2. We can go into other ones, but 2 fundamental ones. The first also begins in utero, and it functions throughout the lifespan. That is implicit or procedural memory. The other memory system is explicit or declarative memory, and that begins around the age of 3. That's what we think of as recall memory. And recall memory is very important for learning. It is very important for doing things purposefully, but it can change with context and people and time. Implicit memory, much more significantly, is the encoding of lived experience. And it doesn't change over time, and it doesn't have to be conscious. And it is basically our absorption of what we live. And the absorption happens in the same procedural steps as the originating experience. So we're going to go into that much more thoroughly in that video. The third keystone is identifications. Identifications are the ways we take in people to whom we have emotional ties that help grow our ego in the most positive sense, in terms of our sense of self. Now, we may internalize very negative things. We call those introjects. Those don't grow us. They just impede us, and they do the same job internally that they did externally. So if you have a very harsh voice in you that is self-critical, that began outside by somebody being very critical of you, and you absorb that, again, through implicit memory. It became a part of you, and it's now a part of how you conceive of yourself. But identifications are extremely important because they are our connection to people who are significant to us, who value us, who love us, and who make us feel our sense of growing self. So that's the third keystone of healthy development. The fourth is what we call affect regulation. Affect is a clinical word that basically means the combination of our mind, our feelings, and our sensations. So if you're crying very hard and you're perspiring or you're shivering and you're thinking badly of yourself, you are what we call affect dysregulated if you can't recover your sense of self and say, okay, I can find ways to self-soothe. I can get help from somebody if I need it. And so over time, the baby learns to the child, and again the adult, learns to self-regulate by the way they are regulated by their caregivers, by those who love them. And the regulation happens originally in 2 ways. This is probably one of the most pivotal tasks of a parent. One is to know what is distressing the baby and to provide the solution. Is the baby hungry? We feed her or him. If the baby's cold, we warm them up. If they're too hot, we cool them off. If they're tired, we rock them or nurse them, help them fall to sleep. Those are all regulatory ministrations of the parent for the baby. When the baby is distressed or unhappy, the parent finds what is distressing the baby and helps the baby self-soothe. And over time, all of those wonderful provisions are absorbed, again through implicit memory, as ways the baby can then soothe themselves. The other important function for a parent, besides providing, is to know what to keep out. What is too much for that infant? What will be too overstimulating, or too jarring, or too loud, or too bright, or too distressing to their young nervous system? Again, they minister to those, they provide to those, but they also know not to take a newborn baby into a crowd of 25 people and let them pass that baby around over and over again, because the baby will get too stimulated too early. A lot of our troubles as individuals growing up is that we don't know how to regulate ourselves and we don't know how to protect ourselves so that we don't get so dysregulated. So this keystone is vital to our sense of well-being. The next keystone is secure attachment. Again, we're going to have a video that talks all about the different kinds of attachment. But secure attachment fundamentally means that upon separation, you do not lose the connection to the person who matters to you, and they don't lose their connection to you. So you don't withdraw, you don't cut off, you don't remain inconsolable. You're able to involve in the immediate environment with whoever is there with you. And then when that significant other returns, you are able to fully engage. Secure attachment does not mean that you don't get upset upon separation. It just means that you're able to be regulated during it and have a sense of trust that that beloved other is going to return because you are valued by them. And then when they do return, you can fully engage. That's what secure attachment looks like. The sixth keystone is hemispheric wiring. So in our first year of life, our right hemisphere is, first 2 years of our life, our right hemisphere is being what we call laid down. We come with hard wiring, just like a computer does, but we also have to have programming. That's the soft wiring. And so babies are born in a state of trust. They are born expecting to be loved and cared for. That's why if you put a newborn baby on the mother's tummy right at birth, unaided, that baby will wriggle and wriggle and wriggle until it finds the breast and latches on. They have an internal knowing that that breast and care is there. Now, hemispheric wiring has two phases in those first 2 years of life. In the first year, it's for the purpose of excitement, of interest, of curiosity, of wonder. And that happens because our parents fall in love with us. And then we fall in love with them, and we fall in love with being alive. But if we only had the excitatory system, we would all be narcissistic, because we also have to have boundaries and limits. And those occur in the second year of hemispheric wiring. So the first year are all the yeses in life. The second year are the no's, which is why the terrible twos occur, because a 2-year-old doesn't like to hear no. They just want to hear yes, but they need the no's. Then in the third year of life, our left hemisphere, which has been fairly quiet so far, gets wired, and that involves semantic language and order and sequencing and all kinds of wonderful learning and things like that. And then in the 4th year, we have what's called the Freudian brain, where the two hemispheres can talk to each other. And now what was available in one is available to the other, and what's available to the other is available to this one. And that's why 4-year-olds are absolutely enchanting creatures. The last keystone is personal voice that is expressed in affective language. So let's say you know somebody who can talk a lot, and they're very articulate, but their emotional life is absent. That's because their personal voice, their ability to author their life and to create the path forward that they want to create for themselves and express their opinions and express their needs and their wants, and do so in very sensory-based, rich language, really got squelched earlier on, even though that left hemisphere learned semantic language and learned a lot of ways of articulating itself. So we are looking for personal voice, which by the age of 3, we should see in a child as the authorial self. That is when the child goes from a me to an I, and they now begin to author their life. And along with that personal voice is very expressive, rich languaging that is sensory-based and emotionally rich and affectively authentic. Those are the 7 keystones of healthy development. And now we're going to, in the next video, go into each one, in the next 7 videos, go into each one of these keystones and explore them in more depth. Thank you for visiting. I enjoy being with you, and I'll look forward to our next time together. Bye.